All right, let's get this going here. I'm not going to wait till 10 o'clock. It is 9:53 on a Friday night, and probably not going to be very long in this particular video, so keep it kind of short and sweet. I'm really not doing a full review of this by any stretch of imagination. Somebody asked me to watch this video the other day, and for the life of me, I can't remember who it was. And I went through my messages on Twitter, and I can't find it. And I know the conversation. I know what they said to me. I know what I said to them. I said, yeah, I'll watch it in the next day or tonight. I think it was like yesterday or the day before. Can't find it. I have no idea how Twitter messages works any longer because I can't ever find anything in it. It's almost gotten to be the point where it's as bad as Facebook. And Facebook is horribly bad at finding out where you had a conversation, right? Because of your thread, you have your sub-thread, and all this other stuff. So I think both are notoriously bad for finding where the hell you were talking about something. Even though there are ways of searching, they don't work very well, to say the least. So anyways, I apologize to whoever it was that wanted me to review this. I'm sure they'll message me later. Let me do a quick wave out there. Is my chat capturing the live chat? There it is. Awesome. So I'm sure they'll get a hold of me. I did put it on Twitter, so if you're not following me on Twitter, go follow me on Twitter, Steve McRae _ or at Steve McRae _ hey there, awesome. And so this video, like I said, I'm not going to do a full review because I'm really kind of looking at the comment sections more than anything else. Make sure you can hear me. My audio's good. I did increase the gain a little bit. People said my gain is a little bit low on the last video or so. I don't know what it is. Something's changed. I'm telling you something changed, and I don't want to clip, so I'm turning down my pre-gain a little bit. I don't know what changed, but it seems like, and I'm not even joking here, guys, every single solitary time my computer has some kind of update, something is different. I'm not losing my mind on this, even though I might be losing my mind for other reasons. I am not losing my mind on this. Whenever there's a system update, whenever there's a software update, whenever there's something that's different, something changes, and it sucks trying to figure it out. But I've had a couple updates on my system, and something happened with the audio where it just wasn't as good as it was before. I thought I fixed it, but I'm adjusting it. I adjusted a little bit earlier to increase the gain on it, adjust my preamp, reconnected everything. So I think right now it should be pretty decent. Awesome says, sounds good. Okay, because my main thing is I don't want to clip, but also I don't have a co-host or somebody else in here. So when I have somebody streaming with me, either by StreamYards or Meets or by Twitter, it's really difficult to mix their audio with mine, so to speak, metaphorically speaking, because it's not really actually mixing. Well, I guess it is mixing. And so their audio might be a little bit lower than mine or higher than mine, and I have to compensate for that just because of the fact that they're on Twitter talking to me and I'm on stream talking to you guys. So there is a little bit of a loss there. But anyways, you guys don't care about that. Get to the point, Steve. I get it. All right, so this video is from a guy named JCO Journey. Never heard him before. 131 subscribers. Although this was 3 weeks ago, and for 131 subscribers, having 3.5K views on a video is pretty impressive, actually. And I did leave some comments to this guy. I told him I do want to have a conversation with him, and the guy, the guy that wanted me to review this video told me he has the Discord. I guess JCO Journey is on Discord, so he'll get a hold of him because I do want to talk to him about this particular argument that he has. His argument is that atheism cannot be defined as just a lack of belief there's no God. And it's kind of odd because his reasoning in this video is on point, but the conclusion doesn't follow, which kind of sucks. And so I'm not trying to pull the fallacy and saying the conclusion is false because it doesn't follow from the argument. His conclusion is false for other reasons. So I want to make that very clear. I'm not doing a fallacy. His conclusion, unfortunately, is incorrect. Atheism can be defined as a lack of belief, but there are reasons to why you wouldn't want to do so. I have proven in my paper that it leads to semantic collapse. This is why the person who reached out to me to review this video wanted me to talk to this guy. Because everything he argues in his video is like he read my work. It's like he read my paper. And so I said, I think you're on the right track, basically, if you want to talk to me about it. It's just I don't think your conclusion holds. Because to say that something cannot be defined is very prescriptive in nature. Awesome says, Frank Turek had a convo earlier with a guy about this very topic, defining atheism and whatnot. I should reach out to Frank on that. I have him on Twitter. I would love to have that conversation with Frank Turek. Matter of fact, I think I'll do that. Awesome. I'll send. I don't know if Frank's ever read my paper or not. Did we ever correspond years ago? I don't think so. But I'm getting back into the atheism stuff a little bit. People are like, "Oh, Steve's just talking about transgender stuff." I talk about a lot of things. I do not want to be pigeonholed, and so except for the atheist, I don't mind being pigeonholed a little bit there because that's my niche. But for the most part, I want to have a roundabout stuff that I talk about, right? But anyways, so he go in the comment section. He's just getting torn up in the comment section of very bad arguments. This one he pinned says, "So I had a really freaking long discussion with JCO Journey on Discord. My initial reaction was like many atheists, which was to roll my eyes at him. But he's very respectful and he knows how to have a productive conversation, not interrupting, sticking to the substance. He actively listens and he responds to direct points instead of dancing around them, which I respect, right? That's what I look for in a conversation. He's still wrong at AF in this video, but he is intellectually honest and I would converse with him again anytime." Well, I can tell you right now, without even doing, more rigorous review, for the lack of better vernacular, and not going over the whole video. It's not a very long video. It's only 8 minutes, but I still don't want to do that right now. He is correct. Logically, he is correct. And it is provable by logic. I proved it with propositional logic. I proved it with Boolean logic. I proved it with predication logic or predicate logic. And Dr. Pi proved it with Ginsler logic when he reviewed my paper. So logically, he is on very, very good footing. I just don't think he had the tool set to actually show this guy the logic behind it, why he's actually correct. There's obviously a lot of replies here. And so they say he's a nice guy and everything. And they keep saying he's wrong, but I can't really find anywhere in these arguments here or these comments why he's wrong. Like this guy just says, as an my goodness, hang on one sec. As an atheist, I lack a belief in God or gods. As an agnostic, I lack the knowledge to have an option that any of this is of any consequence. The problem with that is, of course, in modern contemporary analytical philosophy, we all know by now that when we're talking about the proposition of God existing, agnostic and atheists are, in fact, mutually exclusive positions by the way the word is typically used in philosophy of religion. You can use other senses of the words. You can say, I am using the word in this particular context, but you cannot say as a simpliciter comment, which has no modifications whatsoever, that is how it's used normatively. It's not. If you go read the literature, of course, as I say, if you see the word agnostic, it really is imparting to the person reading the material that the person is undecided on the proposition. Who else we got there? Wait, we got Awesome says, he was just saying atheism is merely a lack of belief in God, doesn't say anything true about the world. Well, that's true. It is a dosastic, it's actually more of a is a mental state. It's a psychological state. It is a second order belief state. It doesn't give any ontological claims by saying I don't believe in something. You're not making a statement about the veridicality of your belief in correspondence with reality. It is just saying that I'm giving you a self-referential or autobiographical assessment of my what's called belief box. Awesome goes on to say, better to use a proposition, do you believe in God, with either yes, no, or I don't know. Well, I don't know doesn't really make sense there, right? If you say, do you believe in God, and somebody says, I don't know, that really isn't an answer, right? Because you do know whether you believe or not. You are either convinced or you're not convinced. You might be right on that line, but if you can't say God exists, then you're not convinced. If you just say, can you say God exists? No, then you're not convinced. You don't. That's it. You don't believe in God. No. See, there is no I don't know when it's a question of do you believe in God, because if I'm asking you what is your belief state, it is either logically you believe or you don't believe, right? If I say, does God exist, then you have the option to say, I don't know. Because you're at that point, you're not even relating an epistemic position. It is not no as an epistemic. It is I don't know as I am not able to answer the question. Therefore, I don't know how to answer it. I cannot say yes. I cannot say no. I can't say no. That's what I don't know means in that particular context. Colorado Biker. Hey, Gary. Hi, Beaties. Hi, hail Satan, hail Sagan, hail Bacon. Damn right. I don't know which I like more, Satan, or Bacon. Any of the above, right? Can you imagine having to hang out with Carl Sagan and Satan eating some bacon? I would be totally down for that. Gary says, atheism to mean I don't believe your BS storybook. Yeah, I mean, that's not really a definition, right? because you can say I don't believe you, but I think that your argument has merit, right? You cannot arbitrarily say that all atheists are saying that the Bible is a storybook, right? Many atheists do take the Bible, at least from a historical context, very seriously. So you can't be throwing around these arbitrary stipulative type definitions as, oh, I don't believe your BS storybook, because that's not how atheism is defined in any of the literature, right? That's stipulative. So going on here, how does this guy respond? I didn't even look at that. He says, as a theist, I lack the belief there is no gods. And again, he got that from me and other people years ago, right? I think, I'm not going to say I was the first to run that argument, but I was certainly the one that promoted it the most, that if you allow for the position of weak atheism, you have to allow for the position of weak theism, right? Graham Oppie noted that ages ago. My argument, though, was the WASP argument, the weak atheist special pleading argument, that incorporated a fallacious context to it, that if you allow for atheism to be a lack of belief, then you have to allow for theism to be a lack of belief that there is no God. And if you don't, then that is special pleading. That's my argument. That is special pleading. Not that, I was the first to come up with weak or strong theism. Of course not, right? Weak atheism goes back to Anthony Flew and George Smith, and even Michael Martin. But the adding of, if you don't allow this as a special pleading, that is my argument. And so far, nobody's been able to assail that. Nobody's given me a reason why theists can't use it that way if atheists want to use it in the way that they want to use it, as merely, lack of belief. And then, like this guy says 12 days ago, your bizarre redefinition of atheism as lack of belief in no gods means that weak atheism are also theists. No, that does not follow. Just because you're a weak atheist doesn't mean that you're a theist. I have proven that if you're a weak atheist, you are also a weak theist. That is logically correct. But that doesn't mean that you believe in God. That just means you have no position either way. The absurdity of this should tell you that you're not on the right track. Well, unfortunately, the person who left this comment isn't correct logically. JCO says, why does not, quote, lacking the belief there is no God describe a theist? Which is a good question. I would ask the same thing. Thumbs up that. And then the guy responds, a weak atheist, edited because I wrote theist and meant atheist here, does not hold the positive belief that there's no God. So in your definition, that's a theist. That's not what he said, actually. And if you watch the video, he doesn't say that at all. What he's arguing indirectly, again, I'm not going to show the video, but indirectly he's saying that if you allow for weak atheism and then say that's atheism, then a theist can say, well, weak theism is theist. And so if you don't believe there isn't a God, you're a theist, just like if you don't believe there is a God, you're an atheist. It's the same exact argumentation, 100%. And so it's a reductio ad absurdum, so to speak. It's showing the problem with the position, doing an internal critique without necessarily explicitly arguing that's the case, right? I would never argue that if you don't believe there isn't a God, you're a theist. But I can argue if you don't believe there's a God, if you don't believe there isn't a God, it would be a theist using the same argument that the lack of belief atheists are making. That's perfectly fine. That's an internal critique. Compressor says, quote, lack of belief there is no God is a burden shifting and nonsensical. It is burden shifting in a way. It's not nonsensical. I can understand it. What it basically is saying that, it's not even burden shifting. Any kind of lack of belief is usually done because of burden shifting, right? It's not necessarily inherently burden shifting. When an atheist says atheism is a lack of belief, they are seemingly most of the time trying to get out of a burden of proof. I've noticed this. So I could argue in some cases people are burden shifting because they're saying, well, the burden of proof is upon you. But even lack of belief requires a burden of justification to hold rationally. Even saying I don't believe you requires rationalization to hold that position of non-acceptance as rational. But it is absolutely sensical. A lack of belief there is no God is saying, I don't hold the position that there isn't a God. That's it. Right? If the proposition is there is no God, and I say I don't believe that proposition, I lack a belief that there's no God. Completely sensical, which is not, I don't think even a real word. I don't think sensical is a real word. Nonsensical is a word, but sensical is kind of those things that people use, but whatever. That's Dirk Dawkins' tier argumentation. I don't understand that at all. Dirk Dawkins is a contrarian who has a lot of inconsistencies and contradictions. Compressor, no, because theism is a positive assertion. So is atheism. The burden lies on the positive claimant. That's not necessarily true at all. The burden of proof lies on anybody that has a position, a opinion, a thought that wants to be rationalized. That's what a burden. There's many types of burden of justifications, many types of burden of proof. It is not just on the person who has a positive claim. That is absolutely wrong. I have never met an epistemologist in my life that accepts that, not one. And so when you say that, theism is a positive assertion, well, so is atheism. It's a positive belief that God does not exist, which this video gets into, by the way. He starts talking about, positive claims, and Compressor says, no, atheism is skepticism toward the positive claim of atheism. Where in academia does that fall? That's an atypical usage of that word, though. If you want to use it as such, that's fine, but I'm talking about normative usages, right? And so when people start throwing in atypical uses of words, that's where all the problems reside. So, hey, Compressor, for the sake of arguendo, just because arguendo, let's use philosophical terminology for a moment. Let's use the normative way that these terms are used in philosophy so we can understand each other. That's how I'm using it, as atheism as the belief that there is no God, which is standard in academia. That's the by far the most prevalent definition, bar none, in the literature. A does not mean without theism. A means not as a negation. So if you have the proposition God exists, then the negation of that proposition is God does not exist. So Compressor, instead of throwing things out there like these people doing on these comments, let's understand this from a philosophical point of view, right? Let's talk about this for once in a philosophical standing, right? So A is not without theism. It has never been without theism. It was actually without favor of the gods. It was referred to a term that referred to Christians that forsaked the Roman pantheonic gods, and they still were monotheistic people. The Christians believe in a monotheistic God, but they were called atheos, meaning without the favor of the gods. Compressor says, no, I'm saying A as a prefix means without or no. No, it means many different things, one of which could be without. Another one is negation, not. If you go read Oxford, Cambridge, Stanford, IEP, all of them agree with this, that in the word atheos, which was the Greek version of atheist, but actually later on the French version of atheisme actually meant to deny or to disbelieve gods. So the A represents negation, not without in this particular instance. That's how it's used in philosophy almost everywhere, Compressor. So do you accept that? Do you accept it in philosophy? That's not how it's used. Because if you don't, then you're just wrong, and you're just making stuff up at this point. All right? So I want to make sure that, Compressor, you understand that we're talking about philosophy here, not, what you find in, the atheist experience, right? Does that make sense to you? Why it would be negation? Because there's two coextensive things for any proposition. There's P and not P. For every P, there's a coextensive not P. And so if the proposition is God exists, and what's the negation of that? God does not exist. What do you call somebody who believes that God does not exist? An atheist. Words are literally defined by usage. Yes. And what's the main usage of these words in philosophy, Compressor? You've literally just proved my point. The word atheist is used in philosophy, bar none, almost 99% of the time, as the position that the God does not exist, that the belief that God exists is false. The proposition is false. Not the belief, but the proposition is false. So if you're going to argue that words are literally defined by usage, then in philosophy, then you've just proved my point. Because what's the main usage of the word atheism in philosophy? The belief that there is no God, or the belief that the proposition of theism is false. So if you're going to argue usage, then Compressor, then you're still wrong, right? I am not. Compressor says your atheist means lack of belief. You're thinking of anti-theist. No, anti-theist is an axiological word that means that somebody believes that the position of theism, the belief that theism is true, or religion is harmful to society. That lowers the axiological value of society. This is, you can go read an entry called The Axiology of Theism on Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. And it makes very clear that anti-theism is a normative term that means does not think that theism adds to the overall value of society. So you're completely confused on your terms. And again, we're talking about philosophy. And this is what I don't understand. Why is it that when I explain to people the terminology used in philosophy, they come back and they just say, well, it's used this way other places. Okay, that's fine, but we're not talking about those other places. Let's talk about it from the academic point of view. You would fail a course on this, Compressor, if you told the professor, oh, but it means this in my Discord group. If a professor told you that anti-theism is an axiological evaluation of the societal merit of religion or the belief that God exists, and you tell them no, it means something else, you're going to fail. So I want to make sure that we are on the same page of that, Compressor. Do you understand that the terminology that you're using is not normative in academia? Compressor says, do you have a burden of proof to disprove every supernatural claim? Absolutely not. If you only have a burden to disprove something, if your proof is that, if your claim is, you can. If I say I can prove that psychic ability is something that doesn't exist, then you have a burden to do that if you want anybody to be taking you seriously. It doesn't mean you actually have to do it. I mean, you have no real onus unless you want to try to convince somebody, right? I can just say, hey, look, I can prove it. And somebody says, okay, well, do it. And you say, well, I'm not going to. You say, okay, fine. And there's your conversation, right? But if I want to convince you, then I have a burden of persuasion, which is a type of burden of proof. If I want to persuade you that psychic ability doesn't exist, then I can then go ahead and say, well, here's the argument. But I have no onus to give you an argument. I can just say that's my belief. What's called a self-referential or autobiographical assessment of my beliefs. Psychic ability doesn't exist. And somebody could argue they could prove it. I don't know how they would do that, but they could just be telling you their position, right? That doesn't incur a burden of proof unless you want to actually persuade somebody or you want to make your position rational to yourself or to other people. Compressor says, atheists aren't claiming God doesn't exist. Yes, it is. That's not burden shifting. This is how it is in philosophy. I want to make sure you understand that, Compressor. Atheism is the position there is no God in academia as normative. Do you not understand that? There is no burden shifting here. Belief is not default. I don't know what they mean by that. All right, Gary. Thanks, bud. I mean, Compressor, do you want to come in and discuss this? Because you're just making no sense here. You're just saying, oh, all of philosophy is wrong or something. I don't understand your argument. I want to be able to talk about this from a philosophical point of view, and you're putting up all this nonsense. What do you mean it's literally not? You just said words or meaning is by usages. Now you're saying it's literally not. Who cares what the word literally means? Automobile means self-mobile, right? Be able to move itself, right? But the space shuttle can move itself. Is that an automobile? Literally, it's an automobile, according to your argument. No, of course not. Words are given meaning by usage. Even Wittgenstein would absolutely agree with that. That's what he argued, that words are given meaning by their usages. And the usages in philosophy, and I would even argue colloquially, but there are there's small pockets of people that use atheism differently. But overall, worldwide, it corresponds to the same position that it is held in philosophy. I've noticed. If you talk to people worldwide, generally speaking, in other countries, if you look at their usages, they are the belief that God does not exist. Awesome says, a person who disbelieves or lack of belief in the existence of gods or gods lowers God of smoking. But that's not a prescriptive definition. Ojo, there is a reason Compressor rejects the definition. He can't defend that position. Oh, absolutely. I agree with you, Ojo. Compressor is not able to articulate his position in any coherent way using philosophical terminology, and he would fail a course, Intro to Religion, Intro to Philosophy of Religion. And this is my point. Why do people want to argue things when they're literally trying to dumb people down? This is what would happen if a creationist would argue, well, evolution just means change. Doesn't mean change of allelic frequency. It doesn't mean a change of allelic frequency or heritable traits in any given population from one generation to the next. That's not what it means. It just means change. Or theory doesn't mean a well-substantiated body of facts that explains observations and makes consistently accurate predictions. Nope, that's not what theory means. It means guess. Compressor, you're arguing like a creationist. And then he starts going back to burden of proof. Again, burden of proof, there's many types of burden of proof. Compressor, do me a favor. Give me 5 types of burden of proof. Name 5 of them. Just 5. See if you can do that. You can go Google it too. Go be my guest. Old Joe, it is best to shift the definition to a more defensible one that doesn't make any positive claim. Why? What's wrong with making a positive claim? I make positive claims all the time, and then I argue for that positive claim. I even have papers proving it logically in my claim, right? I'm not gaslighting. This is not gaslighting at all. How is it gaslighting? I'm literally explaining philosophy to you, and that's gaslighting? I don't understand how you could even make such a silly comment. So, going back to old Joe, why is it bad to make a positive claim? I claim that 0.99 repeating equals 1. I claim I can prove that. And I can prove it multiple different ways. That's a positive claim. I have a burden of proof. I can prove it. I claim that the sun is a fusion reaction. Do I have to prove that? No, but could I argue it with evidence? Sure. Yeah, I can justify that belief. I believe, the earth is round. Can I prove that? Well, not, really prove it because that's in the domain of logic and mathematics, but can I give evidence to why it would be justifiable to believe the earth is round? Absolutely. Could I give evidence why it's incoherent? I shouldn't say incoherent. Can I give justifications to why that if you believe the earth is flat, you're not rational? Yes. Yes, of course I can. So when we're talking about burden of proof, there's nothing wrong with burden of proof. Burden of proof just means to justify in epistemology. It just means, why do you hold the particular position you hold? How do you justify it as rational? That's what it means. So when somebody says, what's your burden of proof for this? Okay, let me show you. This is my evidence. This is my reasoning. And if somebody says, well, I don't believe you, okay, that's irrelevant. You may have absolutely met your burden of proof. They don't have to accept it for you to meet your burden of proof. Your burden of proof is not contingent upon somebody else accepting your claim or not. Compressor says, so instead of being pedantic, which I'm not, why not provide evidence of reason or argumentation of God, for God's existence? I couldn't care less about that. I'm not a theologian. I know the arguments for and against God, most of them, or many of them. Not most, there's a lot, but I know a lot of them. I've read The Miracle of Theism for the most part. It's a very difficult, dense read by J.L. Mackie. But I'm pretty familiar with the arguments for and against God. And if people want to argue those things, great. That's not my shtick. I'm not a theologian. I'm not interested in arguing God exists. I'm not interested in arguing God does not exist. I explain philosophical concepts, especially as they relate to epistemology. Old Joe, I agree that it is arguing good faith to make a positive claim. I'm arguing compressors and bad faith acting to defend a emotional position by cloaking in irrationality, deconstruction of language. Okay, I agree with that. A common tool for this. Yeah, I think you're right on that. Compressor cannot meet his burden of proof that this is normative in philosophy. I can. And so do I think he's arguing in bad faith? I think he's just, I hate to use the word ignorant of this particular topic, but that's what it seems, because he's not apprehending anything that I'm saying, which is not the first time for Compressor. And, I could ask very simple questions, but I don't think I'm going to get very simple answers. Like Compressor, I've already asked, can you find 5 types of burden of proof? Or even more simplistically, how many types of burden of proof, Compressor, do you think there are? I can think of at least 6 off the top of my head. How many can you think of, Compressor? Or I'll ask that to the audience in general. How many types of burden of proof do you think there are? Or names for types of burden of proof? I can run them down here off the top of my head shortly, but I want to see what the audience thinks first. So ad hominem instead of actual providing argumentation. That's not an ad hominem at all. Compressor, if you're going to use logical fallacies, make sure that you get them right. Ad hominem is saying that you're wrong because you're ignorant. That would be ad hominem. I'm saying you're wrong. I'm giving you reasons to why you're wrong, and that you probably were wrong because of those reasons. And, well, I guess you can argue ignorance would be a reason why somebody's wrong because you haven't fully studied the material, right? Which is acceptable uses of that term, right? If I say you didn't study for the test, well, why did you fail the test? Because you didn't study for it. You were ignorant of the material. That's not ad hominem. In that particular case, it is a reasonable, justified reason why that you failed the test. You were ignorant of the material, right? So you're not aware of the material, obviously, and so that might be leading to why you're making these mistakes. No, you have absolutely no idea what you're talking about and stuck on burden shifting. Okay, show that I'm wrong. This is not burden shifting. Tell me what burden shifting is, Compressor. Tell me what burden shifting is. I know exactly what it is, obviously, but how am I shifting the burden? Because I'm talking about epistemology. Anybody that makes a claim has burden. And again, Compressor, how many types of burden proof are there? You haven't answered that question. If we're going to have a conversation, let's have the conversation. Would you like to come in, Compressor? Would you like me to open up a Twitter space? I can do that in a matter of like 3 minutes. So if that's easier for you, let's do it voice. But I would like to know how many different types of burden of proof that you think there are, and how, in any way, am I burden shifting? Compressor, because you're putting the burden on the skeptic of a positive claim. I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm not even saying anything about burden. You brought it up, not me. Is if I say there is no God, is that a positive claim? And a Robert Atheist says, is there more than one way to define atheism? Yes. I think 4 years ago, maybe give or take, I had a presentation that I showed that there was at least, I think, don't quote me, but I think I had 9 that I found. It could be 6. No, it was a lot more than that. It was quite a bit, 7, 8, 9, whatever, different usages of the term. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a standard in academia of what's called unmarked uses of a word, which means that there's no modifications of that word. It's just if I say Awesome Lawsome Clips is an atheist in a peer-reviewed paper, it is connoting to the reader that Awesome Lawsome believes there is no God. So that's without modification, then atheism is standardly understood as the belief that there is no God. Compressor, atheists aren't saying there is no God. Yeah, that's what atheism is in philosophy. You just keep parroting yourself. Atheism in itself is not a positive claim. It is understood by usages that God does not exist is what is understood to be atheism. Source, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, Oxford Dictionary of Atheism, Cambridge Dictionary of Philosophy. You can also go back and read Snellingberg. You can read Oppie. You could read Draper. You could read McCormick. Those are all sources. Okay, well, give me your academic source. Compressor, I just gave you a ton of sources. Give me your source that says that atheism as a lack of belief is the normative use in philosophy. Give me one source of a paper that says that says that. I don't know any of them that even argue that. Even Martin didn't argue that. Flew didn't argue that. Matter of fact, Flew in 1972, when he wrote The Presumption of Atheism, he even says explicitly that he understood that atheism is the belief that God does not exist, but he wanted people to believe that, or use the word in the negative sense of merely lack of belief. So what you're arguing didn't even come around until 1972, when Antony Flew wrote The Presumption of Atheism. So even he understood it as the belief that there was no God. Why is that? Why did Antony Flew write a paper, an entreaty, to say, I want the word atheism to be understood as the lack of belief in God? Why did he write that in 1972 if that wasn't the norm? Please answer that, Compressor. Old Joe said, recent debaters have taken the stance of avoiding any positive claim. I agree with you with that, and it's silly. I'm out there explaining things and making up all kinds of positive claims, but I'm willing to demonstrate them. I'm willing to explain to people these things. I find it frustrating. It's a lazy technique, in my opinion. You're absolutely right. Awesome. All the sources. Yeah. So, Compressor, you've got a lot of questions that I've posed to you, and you haven't answered one. And then you say that I'm wrong. Yet, I've given you answers to everything you've said in a logically coherent manner. I've explained where the resources are. You can find these things. And you haven't answered a single question of mine. So let me ask you, who should somebody take seriously? Compressor or me? I have the facts. I have the evidence. I have the logic. I even have the proofs. Compressor, what have you had so far? But a misunderstanding of the subject matter. And I've offered for you to come in and verbally talk. Would you like to do that? Apparently not, but the offer's on there. Okay, so going back to this stuff, like this person makes the same thing, same claim if you can see it. It says atheism makes no assertions or claims and has nothing to prove or defend. Well, that's, again, not true at all. If atheism is understood in philosophy as the belief that God does not exist, that's a positive claim. Compressor, now my messages aren't even going through. I have nothing to do with that. I don't see any messages you have that wasn't there's been nothing in the filter. Compressor, I have not had to manually prove anything so far. Theism is not restricted to the belief of your deity. Okay, I don't know what that is. Again, there's different types of theism. Compressor, SEP. Yes. Go read that article. Absolutely. That's by Dr. Paul Draper, who was the head chair of Stanford's Philosophy of Religion. He makes it very clear that in philosophy, the standard usage is the belief that God does not exist. He literally says that in that particular article. This guy. This is a good comment. Well, not really, but this guy says, utter nonsense. Proposition P, God exists. You can, 1, accept P is true, okay, accept P is false, okay, or 3, neither accept that P is true nor accept that P is false. That's correct. Both 2 and 3 do not accept that P is true, yes, and thus are atheist. No, that is a false. Just because you don't accept something as true doesn't mean by necessity you're an atheist. I don't accept there's no God. I'm not an atheist. I don't accept there's a God. I'm not an atheist. That's prescriptivism. English does not work by prescriptivism. And in philosophy, I wouldn't be an atheist. Why? Because the sufficiency condition for atheism in philosophy, even Snellingberg points this out, so does Oxford and Cambridge point this out, that the sufficiency condition to determine whether somebody's atheist or not by what they say is their position that there is no God. If somebody says, I don't believe in God, you can't determine their position. Philosophically speaking, it is underdetermined. He says also, neither X nor exists nor X does not exist are ever default positions. That's true. The default position is I don't know. That's not true either. There is no default position on propositions like this. Where has anybody ever seen anybody in philosophy argue there's a default position on a proposition of an ontological or epistemic nature? Nowhere. Nowhere have I ever read in any literature that there's a default position on a proposition. So where are people making this stuff up from? Where are they getting this stuff from? Because it doesn't exist in the literature that I've ever seen. And people know I tend to read a lot. I don't remember everything. I agree with that, but I certainly would remember somebody, saying that the default position is I don't know on an ontological claim. That makes no sense. Because a baby doesn't know. So is the baby's position is I don't know? No, they're innocent toward the proposition. Compressor says this generates the following definition: atheism is a psychological state of lacking the belief that God exists. Yes, read further, Compressor. I know that page intimately. He's explaining why lack of belief is not the way you should define this term. He gives 3 actual reasons why you shouldn't have atheism as a psychological state of lacking a belief. So you can't get one over on Compressor. I've read that article numerous times. I've also read all the archival entries. Matter of fact, the first edition, if I remember, goes back to do what's his name? Dr. Smart. JCC Smart or JLL Smart. That's what it was. Yeah. What's his initials? JCC Smart or JL Smart? It's been a while. He passed away quite some time ago. I want to make sure I tell you correctly. I'm looking it up. JJC Smart. I'm sorry. So JJC Smart, he wrote the initial entry for Stanford on atheism. So, Compressor, you have a lot of reading to do, because if you continue reading, Dr. Draper explicitly explains why you do not want to have atheism as a psychological state, because then you're not arguing atheism has anything to do with God. You're arguing it has to do with somebody's mental disposition. And why would you want to do that? Plus, it could never be true or false. Theism could never be true. Atheism could never be true or false if they're merely mental states. Yes, I understand what it says, Compressor. Now, understand what he's talking about, right? We're not arguing that it doesn't have any different meanings. Draper argues why the meaning of the word atheism is understood as standard, the belief there is no God. That's what he's arguing, right? Do you understand that, Compressor? Do you agree that Dr. Draper is arguing that atheism should not be used in the psychological sense in SEP? And by the way, I've asked how many questions to Compressor now? Old Joe and Awesome. Has Compressor answered any of my questions yet? Because I don't like asking questions and not getting answers. Because if he's going to argue this stuff, he needs to start answering questions, because I don't have the wherewithal to explain something to somebody who's not interested in learning. Did Compressor ever answer how many types of burden of proof there are? Nope, not at all. So, compressor, let's go back to that. Before you say anything else, tell me how many burdens of proof do you think there are? Old Joe, there is a possibility of that compressor may not call in because of his argumentation that is generated by AI. This is hard to cam up in person. I don't cam that much. I do for non sequitur show, but I like to be relaxed and chill. I don't know. Compressor's not that's not AI. He's reading off of Stanford Encyclopedia. Compressor says Draper himself said there's more than one legitimate meaning. We've already established that. That's okay. We all agree there's multiple meanings. But the standard usage is the belief that God does not exist. So what is your argument, Compressor? And again, answer the question. How many types of burden of proof there are? I'm not going to ask it again. How many do you think there are? Please answer that question. Old Joe, there's a possibility that... Oh, I'm sorry. I already read that. Awesome. He is a younger dude who would probably be interested in reading your paper. Who? Who's the younger dude that wants to read my paper? And Old Joe said there are many fatal contradictions in atheism. Compressor, that's one person usage. Read again the paper you're on, the Dr. Draper's paper, where he says in philosophy, I'll read it to you because obviously you're cherry picking parts out of that entry that you just want to point out rather than understand it. Dr. Draper says, quote, in philosophy, however, and more specifically in the philosophy of religion, the term, quote, atheism is standardly used to refer to the proposition that God does not exist, or more broadly to the proposition that there is no God. There's a very next sentence that you negated to read, apparently. Why is that? Why did you just totally neglect to say that particular sentence, which was just right after the one that you said? I lost my thing here. I will put it in the live chat even. Oops. That was smart. In philosophy, however, that is a direct quote. And he's the head of the chair of philosophy of religion, and everybody that I've read agrees with him. IEP says it's the same thing. Oxford, Cambridge, they all say that's the standard. So can you find me a compressor, academically peer-reviewed paper, because that's peer-reviewed, that says it's not standard? Go ahead, find your evidence, compressor. Refute Dr. Draper and find a paper that says that is not standard. Then we will view that. But until then, you have no argument. That's the gold standard is Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. That's where PhDs go to get their sources of what's the current understanding of philosophy. So that's the current understanding of philosophy that's been peer-reviewed. If you disagree with it, okay, show why. Show me a paper that says otherwise. Because you haven't argued anything, and you still haven't answered how many burdens of proof there is. So you have one more chance, compressor. I'm going to ask you questions, and if you don't want to answer them, then we're not going to have this conversation because you're just sea lying at this point. How many burden of proofs are there, do you think? Give me a number. Awesome. A channel called Deliberations Under Ideal Conditions. Cool. Yeah, set me up, man. Have them contact me. It might be necessary to set up a Twitter stream if you want to join. Old Joe. Compressor's not going to. Miller 23 says, don't people actually define it as not accepting the proposition that there's a God? Well, people can make stuff up all they want. Those are stipulative usages, right? And that's fine to have stipulative usages, but that doesn't make them normative, or that doesn't make them what is generally understood in academia. Compressor, your own source admits there's more than one legitimate meaning. Yes, we all agree upon this for the 5th time. Nobody's arguing that. There's many different meanings of words. There's one standard usage. One standard. One standard that without modification, if you read the word atheist in the literature, that's what it means. That's what it's connoting to people. And I mean, you could use the word differently, sure. So nobody's arguing that's not. I even said that years ago I came up with 9 quote legitimate meanings for the word atheism. Atheism has actually been used at one time to denote, or it should be to connote, not denote, but connote naturalism. It's synonymous. Oh, you're an atheist? You must be a naturalist. We don't use it that way any longer. It's not used in the literature that way. But there have been academics and philosophers that used it in that terminology. Is it legitimate? Sure. Yeah, whatever. So great, we're on the same page. Chemo, hey buddy. You say Chemo says even Antony Flew, the spearhead of the lack belief atheism thing, acknowledged that the normative uses still is atheism is the belief that God does not exist. Absolutely correct. Matter of fact, I might even have his quote. Actually, I know I have his quote, but here's what Flew says on that particular subject. I will put it to you right now. We copy and paste it. This is what the Flew says. Whereas nowadays, the usual meaning of atheist in English is someone who asserts that there is no being as God, I want the word to be understood not positively, but negatively. That was in 1972. So in 1972, Antony Flew recognized that in the English language even, that atheism is understood as there is no being as God. But he was arguing, he wanted people to be arguing like you are, that it's the negative. And he clearly succeeded to some people, but not to the people that understand philosophy. They rejected this almost overwhelmingly. Almost overwhelmingly, they rejected Flew's argument. Flew didn't even accept his own argument. He later on became a deist. He realized somewhere down the line that his argument was bad. But here you are, Compressor, arguing an argument from 50 years ago that the person who argued that argument didn't even accept it himself. How brilliant is that? How brilliant is that? By a handful of theists, not very convinced. These are all atheists, Compressor. Dr. Draper is an atheist. Dr. Malik, not Malik, Dr. Martin, well, I'm sorry. Dr. Draper, Dr. McCormick is an atheist. Dr. Snellingberg is an atheist. Dr. Smart is an atheist. These are all atheists. So what are you talking about? The person who wrote that in SCP, Dr. Paul Draper, is an atheist. He believes there's no God. Compressor says, yes, because atheism, skepticism. You're still just putting, okay, well, at this point, you're not having a conversation with me, Compressor, and I'm done. Because if you don't answer questions, we don't play. So you get a timeout for, we'll give you 5 minutes. We'll give you 5 minutes because I'm not going to play this, Compressor. So you get a 5-minute timeout. I hate doing it, but I'm just not going to put up with it. I don't have to any longer because you're not actually engaging honestly. You're just throwing stuff out there and it's wasting my time and yours. Awesome says Antony Flew became the deist later in life, and much of the atheists that he helped were not very happy with him. Yeah, that's true. And people have argued that Flew had dementia, and that might be true, but Flew never came up with an actual good argument that I've ever read of why he became a deist. I don't even remember what his argument even was. It's been so long. But I obviously it wasn't. I don't think it was good, but from what I remember, but I don't remember what it was. but I remember thinking it wasn't a good argument, but I don't remember the specifics. Somebody have to remind me. If you set up the Twitter stream, I'll jump in. Yeah, okay, old Joe, I'll do that. Anthony, not Anthony, I know. Yeah, it's Anthony. Compressor gets speaking. All right, Ojo, do you want to join me on Twitter? Let's do it, man. Let's do it. Rocking all night long. We began to rock. Steady rocking all night long. I can't sing, I know that. Go to spaces, create your space. Atheism. I'm going to put you in a header here, Joe. I'm going to put you as with old Joe. There we go. There we go. I just started it, and I will send you the link right now. Copy link. By the way, I'm curious. When I copy and paste, do you guys hear a click? I know what it's from. I'm just wondering if you guys hear it on the outside. So that's the Twitter space right there, and I'll even pin it. But do you guys hear that click when I copy and paste? Joe, you legend. Awesome. Biology of life and complexity is what convinced him of a designer. Yeah, I think it was something along those lines. Awesome. Yeah, I think now that you've kicked my brain into gear, I think you're right. I think it was an intelligent complexity type design. Like, oh, look at the trees. Yeah. You can open in a Safari. I mean, that's an Apple, but Twitter's Twitter, right? So take your time. Man, I'm trying to keep up with multiple things here. This is more difficult than it sounds. No click for you? Come on, come on, Chemo Maki. Awesome says, I would say he is more than justified in that reasoning. The human body is the most complex thing in the universe. Here's the thing, though. Charles Darwin, one of the greatest things that he gave us was the understanding that just because something looks created doesn't mean it has a teleological design. There's something called teleonomic design. And teleonomic design was the appearance of design through nature. When we see complex patterns of winds on the sands, those are teleonomic designs, right? And so he explained through biological processes, especially natural selection. He didn't understand much about DNA. They knew DNA existed at the time, but I don't think he was really aware of it. He thought that heritable traits were blended rather than particulate. We know now that DNA is particulate. We know that DNA is an actual molecule. And he showed that we don't need a teleological explanation to see that these things could account for themselves by natural iterations, natural phenomenon, right? So I don't look at something like the human body and go, oh, God, there must be some kind of God to it. No, I can say that this came about because of natural processes. It doesn't mandate there's a God. Now, if I saw, a alien spaceship, then I'll be like, yeah, that's not natural. That can't come about by natural means. We've never seen an alien spaceship come about by nature. We've never seen an alien spaceship, period. But if I saw something of that complexity, right, or even just a rocket ship, even like the what's the one that's going to Mars? What's Elon Musk's called? But if we saw a Saturn V rocket, that's more my time. If we see a Saturn V rocket, yeah, I'm not going to say that was not designed because we have historical precedents of people designing rockets and engines, so we know that came from a human mind. But obviously, if we saw a rocket like that, 5,000 years ago, then people are going to be like, yeah, that must be an intelligence, right? But now we know that wouldn't have been from God. We know that it would have been from people. So just because something even is ascribed to intelligence doesn't mean there's a God. But I obviously I don't look at it that way. Can I manually look up on X app? Phone defaults to browser. I don't know what you mean by that. Do you? You can go to Twitter and go to my timeline, and you can click on it there too. Yeah, you can manually look up on the X app. That's better. Yeah, go manually look up on the X app and look at the last thing I tweeted because it automatically does it, and then you can come in that way. Let me pop out this chat. That might be a little easier on me. There we go. Yeah, that's easier. That's smart. Chemo says, if teleological is a fact, then will we all attain perfection? Well, even still, it doesn't necessarily even mean that God is all good, right? I mean, there's different variants of God. To say that God is 100% good might have some, metaphysical ramifications to it of what it would mean to be all good. Because the problem is when you say all good, that seems to imply omnibenevolent and also just, because God is a just being. And so the problem is that you can't have benevolence and justice completely at the same time. No society has 100% benevolent and 100% just, because just is the suspension of justice. Benevolence is the suspending of justice. So if I say, hey, look, I just going to be a benevolent leader and nobody is accountable for anything, then there's no justice. What is my username? At Steve McRae _. I can put my actual Twitter in there too if you need it. One sec. There we go. Yeah, I don't believe free will exists. You know that, Awesome. At least not in a libertarian sense. Let's see if we can get him in here. Yeah, but that's a whole different discussion. But anyways, I do want to talk to Ojo when he gets in here, and why he's waiting on that. Yeah, I'll reply to my Twitter stuff later. But I do want to talk to this JCO Journey guy. I don't even know where he's from. I kind of want to do the reason why I did this as a pre-review and not an actual review of his video is because I'd rather do his video with him and probably even on his channel, because the people leaving these comments were so bad. They were almost like, they were kind of like, compressor level, that I'd rather spend my time talking to him where his audience can understand this, right? Oh, there we go. Hey, Joe. Oh, excellent. How am I doing so far?
But first of all, I'd like to say that this deconstruction of language that we see often, and the refusal to take a positive position, I really have to confess that I'm finding it exceedingly frustrating to try and engage in those discussions. And I think a lot of people will give, like, I actually consider it trolling somewhat. A lot of people will give those people credit. I think it's disingenuous. I myself, and I won't harp on this very long, but I think it's much like breaking a window. It's very easy to rip something down, but it's not easy to create. And, when you start asking questions and people fade away or don't answer or change the meaning of words, to me, I find very little use in those conversations.
Yeah, it's lazy. It's lazy thinking. And by the way, you were accidentally muted for the first 3 seconds. So once again, he said that my arguments have been fabulous so far. Fabulous was the word he used. Just for a few seconds. But you also said that you had something to criticize or add to it, basically.
Well, a couple of questions. I would like you.
No, you get speaker immediately. Just join. Don't have to request.
No, I have it open for.
All right, on purpose.
Yeah, I have it open.
Would you be able to address your 5 burdens of proof? I would love to hear that.
Oh, yes, because the professor didn't answer that, did he?
That's right. Well, he probably, like I say, well, anyways, yeah. So
okay, sure. I'll explain that to you. So, by the way, just to let you know for the listeners, we are streaming this on YouTube. So, if you want to come up and speak, you're more than welcome to. But it is going out live on YouTube channel. So, I just want to make that very clear to the people listening. But anybody's welcome to speak. But Joe, yeah. So hey, when we're talking about stuff, we're talking about my live chat, which you're not going to be able to see through Twitter. I had asked the compressor for 6 types of burden of proof, right? So let me tell you a few of them, Joe. And there's 2 major ones in legal sense.
You're unmuted. I'm unmuted?
Yeah, Darnell. Can you mute, Darnell? Darnell, can you mute real quick? Darnell?
He said, can you mute?
Yeah.
It's messing up. I'm sorry.
It's cool.
Can you remove me as speaker for a second, and then I request again?
Good question. Can I? I'm supposed to be able to do so, but I'm not sure how to do that. Oh, I do. I know how to do that. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah, I'm still learning spaces. Okay, so we all know that burden of proof means onus probandi. And Demetrius, if you want to speak, just give me a second, and then I'll call on you.
Hey, I just want to let you know that it worked. Thank you.
Thank you. No problem.
I have one question for you, Steve.
Well, hang on. Let me get this out because I got to do this.
Well, I mean, come on, please. It's real quick. I swear. I'll get straight to the point.
All right.
Who's winning tomorrow, Islam or Dustin Poirier?
I don't know either. I don't know the question.
I'm putting my mortgage on it. Whatever you pick, I'm telling you right now, Steve. Pick right, please.
I'll pick for you. I think Poirier's.
Goddamn right, America, baby. Let's ride.
I wish I had an answer for you. I don't know. All right, so. Onus probandi, in burden of proof, basically means.
One more question. I swear it's the last one.
Nope. I got to finish this, Randall. Again, I'm live on YouTube.
No, he muted me though.
I did not mute you. Randall, I didn't mute you, so there you go. All right, so in the legal sense, right, there's what's called the burden of production and burden of persuasion. Burden of persuasion means the evidence that you need to convince a jury or a judge that something is the case. Burden of production is that you have enough sufficient evidence to even bring something to trial. These are both times of burden of proof, right? But they don't mean, obviously, that something is proven beyond any, permanency, any kind of surety. So there's burden of persuasion, burden of production. There's also burden of refutation, burden of rejoinder, burden of defense, burden of epistemic epistemic versions.
I swear, one last question. What kind of burgers are we talking about here?
Burdens.
We're talking Whoppers, Big Mac.
Randall, please stop talking. Show some respect.
Yeah, I've removed him. So there's epistemic burdens and there's discursory burdens as well. So if I say that I believe 0.99 repeating equals 1, right? I have a epistemic burden to myself to justify that as that position being rational. I don't have to tell anybody else anything about it. I could be sitting alone, just like I am right now, and think to myself, 0.99 repeating equals 1. And if I want to hold that thought rationally, then I need to come up with a justification for it. Obviously, my justification for that is through calculus and algebra and geometric progressions and things of that nature. But if I want to persuade you that 0.99 repeating equals 1, then I have a burden of persuasion. And just because you're persuaded or not has no relevancy whether I meant by burden of proof. I can give you a calculus book and say, here's the basic calculus for this particular reason why 0.99 repeating is the same number as 1. And you can say, old Joe, well, I don't believe you. I can be like, okay, whatever. I met my burden. You're just ignorant of mathematics, right? So when we're talking about burdens of proof, there's many different kinds. There's also burden of refutation. There's burden of response. And of course, there's similarities to all of them. Right? Rejoinder, response, defense, these are all kind of used interchangeably. But I wanted to know if Compressor, when he was in my live chat, understood that there are different types of burden of proof, right? And so when you say the burden of proof is only on the positive claim, that's really not having a fundamental understanding of epistemology. Does that make sense, Ojo? And then I'll call Burnell. And hi, BBB.
It does. What I'm wondering is why certain people would take that position. What would be the advantage?
Because they're lazy. They're lazy, and they don't want to put forth an argument. Like if they don't want to say, "Look, there is no God," because then people can say, "Well, prove it." And the response to that is, "What? That wasn't my claim. My claim. Let's pretend I'm the atheist, for example. Let's pretend that I am the person making the positive claim there is no God, and you say, "Well, prove it." And I say, "Well, was my argument that I could prove it?" No, so you just strawman me. So anytime ever to an atheist, when an atheist says that there is no God, and a theist says, "Well, prove it," the theist is strawmanning him. All you have to do is say that's a straw man, because that's not my argument. My claim is not I can prove there's no God. My claim is there is no God. There's a big difference between those two claims. That word proof means a big difference in that proposition.
There's a huge difference. So if you don't mind my asking, and you don't have to answer, I myself, I'm
an open book, man. So I'm here for
I'm an agnostic myself. In this question, do you have anywhere you sit in that, or is it because it's relevant to the discussion? Really, it is. But.
Oh, you don't know my position?
No, I don't. No, sorry.
Really?
No. This is the first time I've ever stumbled across your channel.
Oh, interesting. I thought I didn't know your name. Look at my Twitter. I'm literally known as the A-Holy Pope of Agnosticism. That's my.
Oh,
you're
the
Pope. I'm the A-Holy Pope. A-Holy Pope.
The A-Holy.
Because Matt Dillahunty took Pope of Agnosticism, even though he doesn't like that. And Matt Dillahunty and I don't really get along very well, obviously.
Okay, would you say that he displays some of the same techniques in his own argument?
100%. 100%.
Yes, that's one of the things I found most frustrating.
That's why Matt and I don't get along, because he knows my arguments are good, and he doesn't want to ever have to address them.
Excuse me, Steve.
One sec, I'll get you to Demetri. I promise in 30 seconds. Promise.
I'll give you 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
No more.
I promise. I keep my promises. It'd be even less than that. It was my arguments that convinced Matt Dillahunty indirectly that the agnostic atheist position is a nonsensical position. He changed his position years ago, and he no longer identifies as an agnostic atheist, and that is derivative of my arguments. I guarantee it. I know that for a fact. I know the people that talk to him. I've talked to him. And so every time he argues against it, he uses my argument. So anyways, Demetrius, go ahead. That was
so this is kind of for Steve and Joe. Y'all talking a lot about burdens. I just want to know which one of y'all got the burden of licking all the sweat off my gooch real quick. Y'all are some retards, all right? I want y'all to kill yourself.
Thank you very much. All right. Have a good day.
Faggots. Good night.
Good night.
Wait.
It's fascinating. Like just even listening to this, how many times that people and the effort people have gone to disrupt even this simple conversation.
It's bizarre, right? I mean, trolls are. I don't understand the point of trolling. I never did. It serves no useful purpose, and it shows that people are mentally unwell. I find that trolls are mentally unwell people.
No, there are what? How many of us in the chat? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How many are 3 trolls that we've confirmed, or only 2 so far? That's a big percentage.
And yet, but you were over in my live chat. My live chat is great right now.
Yeah.
There's not. I mean, Compressor wasn't a troll. He's been around before, but I only timed him out for 5 minutes. I didn't ban him. I just said, look, if you're not going to interact and you're just going to be throwing stuff out there, then you're of no use to me and my stream tonight. So, anyways.
So another question for you before you get back into the. If
Darnell,
you had
one sec. Darnell has his hand up. Darnell, did you want to say something?
Yeah, it's about one of the burdens.
Okay.
How many dicks can you fit in your fucking ear? How many dicks can you fit in your fucking ear?
Yeah, maybe I got rid of the wrong guy. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was Darnell last time.
Was it? Interesting. Yeah, interesting. So, yeah, what is it, Ojo?
Okay, so, and once again, these are personal questions, but if you had to lay money right now, and you had to bet either on intelligent design or not, which would you lay money on?
I don't believe it. I don't accept intelligent design. Matter of fact, I just moderated that debate with Casey Luskin from the Discovery Institute and Dr. Dan. I don't know if you watched it on the Non Sequitur show. So I just moderated that very discussion. If you're familiar with Evolution News.
I'm actually not. No, I'm not familiar with any of this stuff. It's quite fascinating to me.
Okay, are you familiar with the Discovery Institute?
So circling back to Darnell's question, was it the left ear or the right ear?
All right, I'm going to restart the. I'm just going to restart because I understand how these people are getting in when I'm literally. Oh, I know what it is. Yeah. So, Alexa, turn off alarm. All right. So. The Evolutionary News and Discovery Institute, they're the ones that promote the whole intelligent design thing, right? But I don't see intelligence when I look at certain thing. I see teleological design, which is designed by nature, not teleonomic design, which is designed by nature, not designed by some kind of actual intelligence.
Yes. Yeah. You wouldn't argue for any consciousness behind creation. You wouldn't lean in that direction.
No, I'm agnostic. Yeah. Okay. So I don't believe in God. I don't believe there isn't a God. I do lean more toward there is no God. I mean, I lean toward atheism. I actually have an affinity towards Satanism. I love the fact that TST, the Satanic Temple, goes around and basically does exactly what you find Christians and fundamentalists do. They're advocating for things like prayer in school. So the Satanic Temple says, hey, yeah, you know what? We want to have our satanic priest pray in school and do benedictions and opening things for ceremonies. I think that's brilliant. I'm all for that.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what track were we on before I disrupted it with some of my my religious questions there? You were talking about burdens of proof? Yeah,
because, there's this adage out there that only the person making the positive claim has a burden of proof. Well, that makes no sense. If I say to myself 0.99 repeating equals 1, but I can't justify it, then that's not a rational position. It's not rationalized. Rationalized means you have to justify it. So I have a burden of proof to myself.
Did you? I might have misheard. Was there one that was the burden of persuasion, or did I mishear that?
Burden of persuasion means that if I want to try to persuade you that my proposition is true, then I have a burden to explain to you why that's true. But these are actually discursory burdens. These are not moral burdens. These aren't even epistemic burdens. These are discursory. So we're having a discussion like we're doing now, old Joe.
Yeah.
Then there's an obligation. There's a kind of a compact we both agreed upon that when we're going to have a dialectic that we're going to be able to converse with each other civilly, right? There's also Greece's maxioms, if you're familiar with them, about how you should basically conduct discussions. And when I'm debating somebody or I'm having a discussion with them and I want to persuade them that I'm correct, then I have a discursory burden to give them the evidence for that particular claim the best that I can, right? But those are discursory burdens. They're not moral obligations.
Wouldn't that require a good faith interlocutor, though?
Yes. Matter of fact, I'm glad you point that out. I do assume what's called the rational man standard, that basically, people generally will put forth things in honest means, that they don't go into a discussion with ill intent. They're not trolling. They really do want to have what's called dialectic synthesis, which are a meeting of the minds to come up with some kind of core understanding. But Grice had these maxioms. You might want to look them up. Grice had the maxiom of quantity, quality, relation, and manner. And these were not prescriptive. These were actually descriptive of conversations. They weren't meant to be taken as you must follow these. There are actually times where you would call what's called flaunt them, but they generally hold true descriptively. If, like, for example, the maxim of quantity, and I just pulled it up here so I can read it to you so I don't butcher them. But Grice argues that the maximum of quantity is where one tries to be informed as one possibly can and give as much information as needed and no more. In other words, be succinct but not overbearing, right? So if we're having a conversation, I don't want to shotgun a bunch of stuff. I want to sit there and give you a bunch of links, because we see people do that. We see people just throw a bunch of stuff against the wall and says, oh, there's my argument. That's violating Grice's maxim of maximum of quantity. You want to be informative, but you don't want to give too much. No more, no less. I can continue with the other three if you're interested, but
it's fascinating, because when we think about like a bricklayer or a carpenter, we talk about the skill of their trade, but very few conversationalists will break their trade down, or break their skill down and say, these are the things I need to work on in order to accomplish my end goal. So it's very interesting. Yeah, please proceed.
Yeah. Okay. So the next one is called the quantity of quality. And he says, where one tries to be truthful and does not give information that is false or that is not supported by the evidence, which is the one that you actually just kind of came up with, right? You assume that your interlocutor is of good intent, that they're being truthful, they're being rational, they're not trying to deliberately give you misinformation, and that their information they're giving you is somehow supported by some type of evidence. The other one.
So sorry, go ahead. I apologize.
No, go ahead. Let's talk about each individual one if you want.
Sure. I'm wondering how often, like every once in a while, I'll slip back into my redneck self. So I'll give you an example from the community I grew up in. There were two mechanics that I watched get into a fist fight in a bar one time. One mechanic was a Ford mechanic and the other was a Chevy mechanic. And in the end, the Ford mechanic was standing on a table screaming at the top of his lungs, I am Ford, I am Ford. So I'm wondering how much a person's worldview interferes with their ability to actually be an honest interlocutor, if that's far harder.
It does. It's called cognitive bias, right? This whole goal, we've been having the transgender discussions on Twitter on my time feed lately. And I find a lot of them come into the conversation with huge amounts of cognitive bias. And it's very difficult to get around that. Matter of fact, I've had people say that I argue things I've never argued. Cognitive bias. They may have seen somebody else argue it. Oh, well, Steve argues that. Well, no, I never have. But they're laden with historical references that have no relevance to me, but they've had these discussions so many times, they just think that, I'm going to be like every other interlocutor when I'm not going to be.
So why do you think it's harder for us to see that? If I make an error in a math calculation, it's fairly easy for me to admit to, but cognitive bias, an error that way, might be far more difficult for me to let go of. Would you say that would be true?
Yeah, because they're personal, right? Especially, okay, not to go get into the transgender discussion tonight, because I'm not doing that tonight, but when your whole worldview is based upon your identity, what you consider to be your self-identity, then anything that goes against that is going to be very personal to you. So that's why they're very reluctant to change or admit any fault, because to them, that is a personal attack against their very core.
So it's possible to say that one might be willing to willfully sacrifice the truth if it would
advance their argument,
preserve their worldview, preserve their own personal worldview.
Absolutely.
See, I believe that's the most deadly trap we face as human beings in our search for the truth. I really do.
It really is. It is a huge trap. It's a mind trap. Real quick, Chris Goodwin says there are dozens or hundreds of A words that all mean without word. I'm not sure what that means. Atheist means without. No, it doesn't. We've already established that. The theist is a belief in God. Atheist is redundant. It's in the definition. That is incorrect, Chris. My live chat will be happy to explain that to you, because we just went over that. Or you can watch the beginning of this video. But A is not without in the word atheist. That was not what it meant in the Greek. In the atheos is not what it meant in atheisme for the French. It always meant and understood as either without favor of the gods or denial of the gods, as in not as a negation, as in the acceptance of the negation of the proposition God exists. So what you said, Chris, unfortunately is not true. This is what I'm saying. For the people that want to look into these different topics, they really need to start actually going to the academic literature. Watching the atheist experience is not going to educate you on atheism. It's not going to happen. It's going to maybe help you, maybe a little bit with argumentation, but unfortunately it teaches a lot of fallacious reasoning and a lot of argument by assertion. And so, Chris, my recommendation to you, if you actually want to learn about atheism in the philosophical sense, go look at the literature, because you're absolutely wrong. So let's go back to Grice's maxioms. I'll go back to the fourth one. Hey, is that...
Evening. Morning.
What's up, bud?
Yeah, Axel84 is an alt account. Hi, Steve.
Yeah,
I know.
I remember. Yeah. So,
wait,
what are you doing? Wait, first of all, what are you doing awake? It's like, what is it, 7 a.m. for you? Did I lose my sound? Hello? Where'd you go?
Sorry, it's I've got to keep every time my phone screen blocks, it turns my mic off. So this might be a pain. My body jolts me awake at 6 o'clock every morning, regardless. So,
all right. So,
what I was just going to say, it's Joe, is it?
Yeah, that's right. Old Joe, yeah.
Old Joe. Hi, bud. Yeah, what you were saying, about being so unbelievably wed to a position that it gets in the way of rational reasoning, is really common. I mean, this is the atheist new TM group not wanting or being willing to even accept the argument, no matter how rationally or logically it's presented, that atheism is the belief that a God does not exist.
Right.
And agnosticism is a non-believer who just isn't convinced of the proposition. An agnostic is a non-believer who isn't convinced, and a theist is a person who believes in a God of any type. Now, I was of the atheism I'm just not convinced. I don't believe. You could be a lack theist. You could be innocent of the concept. All of these fell into the atheist bucket. But when I wasn't wed to it. I hadn't I hadn't made it a foundational part of my identity. I wasn't raging against religion. So when I started looking at the philosophy and the logic of it and realized that I was wrong, I was just like, oh, okay, well, I'll start using this instead, because I haven't made it foundational to who I was.
John, that's because you saw my work. And by the way, somebody's asked who's the new guy talking. It's John, who's usually on my channel. But yeah, let me get through these maxims real quick for old Joe here. And yeah, we are streaming live, by the way, John, if you didn't know. So if you want to look at the live chat too and come over there.
No, I just did see.
Right. Hi, Soul Watcher Paranormal in the live chat. Okay, so number 3, the maximum relation, where one tries to be relevant and say things that are pertinent to discussion. Old Joe. So in other words, you talked about the reasonable man standard. If I'm going to have a discussion with you on a particular topic, right, I'm not going to be going off on rabbit holes. And this is one thing that I've really had to catch myself and really had to impose upon myself with other people, because other people are trying to drag me down rabbit holes. And if you look at my timeline, for those who follow me on Twitter, and if you don't, you should, but if you follow me on Twitter and I say the word irrelevant, what I'm meaning by that, and I'm going to tell you what I mean by it so you know in future reference, it means that what you're saying is not relevant to the discussion. It is a rabbit hole. It is absolutely tangential, and I don't want to go down that path because it has no relevancy to the core argument that we're having. And I have found that you haven't linked it to that. And so when I say irrelevant, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. And if somebody says, well, Steve's not answering the question, go ahead, because it's irrelevant. I'm not dodging anything. People know that I don't dodge questions. Matter of fact, Planner Walk asked, he wrote me the big old long thing, and I wrote him, a response to it because it was articulated very well. And I said, okay, great. You wrote me a coherent, articulate post. I'm going to respond to it in kind, right? And so he didn't go down. I don't think he really went down too many rabbit holes. But when somebody starts going down these really bizarre rabbit holes, I'm like irrelevant. And the last one is the axiom of manner. where he says one tries to be clear and brief and orderly as one can in what one says, and where one avoids obscurity and ambiguity. So the maximum of manner is basically the maximum of succinctness and of try to avoid ambiguities. And this is the whole thing when it goes back to, I even argued this before with Grice's maxioms, that atheism as a lack of belief flaunts that maxiom. And again, these are descriptive, not prescriptive, but it flaunts that because lack of belief is ambiguous in the fact that it's underdetermined, old Joe. Because if you just tell me you don't believe in God, that's ambiguous. I don't know what your position is, philosophically speaking. It's indeterminate. But if you say you believe there's no God, I know your position now. You're an atheist. You say you believe there's a God, I know your position is a theist. But when you say you lack something, if you tell me, old Joe, that you're not a duck, does that tell me what animal you are? No, of course not. If I say, what do you want for dinner? And you say, I don't want chicken, that doesn't tell me what the hell anything about what you want for dinner. So just by saying you lack something doesn't mean anything about what your position is. So atheism as a lack of position or lack of belief is ambiguous. It violates that maxim, of maxim of manner, which again isn't prescriptive. You don't have to follow those maxioms. There are times you actually flaunt them, but generally speaking, in a conversation, you don't want to be ambiguous. And lack of belief, atheism is ambiguous. Hi, Ozian.
Hey, but I sort of disagree in common language. Most Americans, at least when they say they're atheist, mean they just lack a belief in God. So I can take them where they're at. I'm not confused, or I just ask them.
I understand that too. And I mean, the problem is and by the way, I put the link to join the space, Chris, if you want to come in, because your argument is Flu's argument, and we've already discussed that. Again, just because one word, if I say abreast, that means without breast. If I say with a front, does that mean that without front? Of course not. Your argument is called specious. Specious means it's not a good argument. It means it sounds like it might be a good argument, but it's not, because using your usages, then abreast should mean without breast. A front should mean without a front. But no, words have meanings. Hang on. Words have some of the
most commonly misunderstood etymology of words is the atheist, agnostic.
Right. Right. Exactly. So just because words like asymmetric, by the way, that's straight out of Flu's paper. I believe that Flu actually argued by using the word asymmetric, if I'm not mistaken. I have his notes on that actually. He actually argues. Yeah, he used atypical and asymmetrical. So I'll put it in the live chat here, but it's a very long quote. So, one sec. And I'll read it to you guys.
What you're saying, Ozian, about in America, where if an atheist says, I'm an atheist, you know what they mean. I think colloquially, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's the same in the UK as well. The problem, I sort of agree with Steve here. The problem isn't so much that people use these different words. They're polysemous words. They have different usages, and as long as everybody understands the term that they're using, that's fine. But when people walk onto a stage to debate the philosophy or the logic, and they use these terms which have prescribed definitions when they're discussing this subject matter, that then becomes an issue, because it erodes the use of the word on the academic level rather than the colloquial level.
Yes, I agree. So Flu said, I want the original Greek prefix a to be read in the same way atheist as is customarily is read in other. I want the original Greek. How did I put that in there twice? There we go.
Etymological fallacy. And why did they keep quoting Flu when Flu was a deist?
I don't know.
Flu believed in a god.
He didn't even accept his own argument, but he argued because it's used in atypical and asymmetrical, we should use it as the same in atheism. And as you pointed out, that's an etymological fallacy. It literally is an etymological fallacy. That's what an etymological fallacy is, saying that we should use it this way because it's used historically that way in other words. Well, that's irrelevant. As somebody pointed out earlier, words have meaning by usages. Wittgenstein was very clear on that. And I think everybody accepts that. And again, I accept that atheism as a lack of belief in colloquial language exists, just like theory as a guess exists. I have a theory on how somebody committed the crime. Is that the same as how it's used in science? Of course not. But it's
it's like when people say evolution is just a theory. You essentially just told me that evolution is a factually based. You just told me evolution is a fact. Well, congratulations, I agree with you.
Well, you can also argue this is a guess too, right? Evolution is just a guess. Nobody in the right mind would actually, think that's a good argument. So.
No, what I was getting at is that when people see the word theory and think that it just means, it's just an educated guess. Whereas when we see the word theory, we understand that a hypothesis, people under belief, then it becomes a hypothesis because they start formalizing it and then they test it and then it becomes a theory once it becomes, tested thoroughly. And then we assign a sigma value to it based on how confident we are that we are correct about it. That's not just a guess. The word theory is heavily loaded with a lot of practical experimentation and testing in academia in order to get to that stage. So
yeah, I just had a debate recently with somebody. His name's Charles, I think, actually, but he goes by Evidence of God, and he's done a couple debates on Modern Day Debate. I did one on is Christianity true? And his whole argument was that his version of evolution was true. And so I was trying to pin him down. So are you saying if the theory of evolution that we understand it in science is true, that falsifies God? And he's like, no, I'm not saying that. I'm like, then why are we talking about evolution?
They always bring
if evolution doesn't...
I don't understand why they think that evolution and theology are coextensive. They're not.
He didn't understand the words I was using. He did think it falsified God. He just refused to understand the language I was using.
So what did he think falsified God? I missed that bit. Sorry, Ozzy.
He thought that the Bible with the kinds and stuff, sort of the answer in Genesis version of evolution, was true. And that if the other version of evolution is true, then his Bible would be false. But he couldn't even agree to that concept. I don't even know why he even brought it up. He was all messed up. He said,
that doesn't sound coherent.
Yeah, it was incoherent.
Old Joe, so you might be interested in this. So Watcher in the live chat says, if there's an absolute difference between a negative claim, I do not believe, and an actual lack of belief, what should we call the lack of belief? And here's an interesting thing. So negative claims, Russell argued that all negative claims are still positive claims, which is not the same as a negative ontological claim, right? A negative ontological claim is a positive claim about the non-existence of something. But all negative claims of something to be the case, something that corresponds with reality, are still positive claims. So all negative claims are positive claims. So a negative ontological claim is a positive claim that something does not exist. Does that make sense? Because a lot of people get that confused.
Yeah,
a lot of people claim there's no difference between I believe there is no God and I am not convinced that a God exists.
I don't see what it would be.
They say, well, they're the same thing. And they're like, no, they're absolutely not the same thing.
It's a difference without a distinction. The word belief is here's the thing. They're both intentional verbs, right? They're both something that something has to be doing the believing, right? If I say I am convinced, I am literally saying that an intentional mind has the ability to be convinced. You can't say a stone is convinced of something, right? And not to get into rock atheism, but that would be incoherent because they don't have the ability. They have no intentional states. So when somebody says I believe P or I'm convinced of P, they both ostensibly, in my opinion, relate the same thing. Could there be nuanced differences? Sure.
Sorry, Steve. I may have misspoke, but what I said was there is a very foundational distinction between I believe there is no God and I'm not convinced that there is a God.
Oh, okay, yeah, those aren't the same thing at all. Then.
Sorry,
that's not what you said, though. I guarantee it.
Sorry, my apologies. I nearly popped you an aneurysm there. Then sorry.
No worries.
On that note, that seems to me to be a fairly simple distinction, and yet it's my impression, and I could be wrong, that there's a tremendous amount of confusion in that regard.
Yeah, I speak to people on the regular who are like, well, what's the difference? I'm like, well,
there's minor differences, I think. People could make the arguments if you really want to get nuanced in the terms, because words have usages, right? Obviously. When I say that I believe something, that's an epistemic disposition in the dostastic realm. but convinced means a little bit more relating to surety. It connotes something more to the perlocution effect. So if you ever look at speech check theory, there's locution, illocution, and perlocution. And these are different aspects of what somebody's saying. So there might be different illocution or perlocution of connotations by using convinced over belief, but like I said, ostensibly, they really do mean the same thing. And unless somebody's being really, 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 having a linguistic conversation, then it really, to me, makes no difference. But when you say that I am convinced of something, you're kind of imparting to somebody that you have a strong mental state, that you are relating to them, that you are believing the proposition. So you're convinced, right? It just connotes more of a psychological state than belief does, to me personally.
Hey Steve, could I ask? I've got to get going for two reasons. One, it's late. And two, I think you may have Hank O'Flamo, the most famous debater on YouTube, with you now.
Hank, have you gotten famous, Hank? Have you gotten famous?
Well, it might be him. I
that's
may
Hank.
be
That's Hank.
So I have one
Yes,
question.
it's me.
And I apologize as I struggle with some of these concepts. I'm at the limit of my intellect, so the questions are poorly formed.
No,
But
great. I love this.
Yeah, I'll take a crack at it. So you obviously have spent a lot of time discussing this issue with theists and atheists alike.
A little bit, yeah.
If you had to say, if we go back to our earlier conversation around the trap of confirmation bias, and I realize this might be an unfair question, who would you say, in your opinion and in your experience, is more vulnerable to that trap? The atheist? I'm not talking about the agnostic now. I'm talking about the average atheist or the average theist. That's my question.
The theist.
The theist for sure, eh?
Yeah. I don't have to have
Could you elaborate on that a little, like how?
Yeah, because you at least in the theist discussions, they're very cocksure. Atheist, sure.
I would say it depends on the type of atheist. If you divide the atheists down into subgroups, I'd say sort of like the Church of England Protestants are probably less so. But if you take like a creationist or a presuppositionalist, they're the ones. The confirmation bias is strong within them.
Yeah, I mean,
and you can make the same argument of the atheists
and
as
the
well.
reason why I say this is because it goes back to identity theory, right? Theists make religion and God essential to their core. It's part of them. Many of them wouldn't even know what they would do in life if they didn't have that core belief. But an atheist, it's not really part of their core belief, right? I mean, it's just, they believe there's no God, but whatever. They don't. Some of them, do, but most of them don't go to church to talk about their belief that there's no God. So people that are religious, they're going to go to church. There's performative things. It's part of their whole social dynamic. Now, of course, there's atheist activists out there, but that's for a completely different thing. Most atheist activists do so for political reasons more than anything else.
I would categorize myself that.
I'm just going to jump down, and Hank is a very thoughtful fellow. I'm going to hang around.
I've known Hank a very long time.
Yeah, I'm going to listen in the live chat.
Thank you, Joe. Please stop by more and make sure that you subscribe to my channel.
Okay, sounds good.
Nice speaking to you, Jay.
Yeah.
Somebody messaged me to debate you, Steve, about trans issues.
Wouldn't be useless to me. No offense. And that's not a dig at you. You're very good at what you do. It just would be of no interest to me.
I told him I didn't want to do it. Well, no, not me debate you, but it's Stone Butt. You wanted me to moderate.
Oh, I will have nothing to do with that guy.
Okay.
Yeah. Why would he even bring my name up? He can literally walk off the end of a flat Earth.
I don't even know who he is. He messaged me on Discord.
He brought up my name?
Yeah, he wanted to debate you on trans issues.
No, I will never talk to him ever again. He's dead to me.
Okay.
I don't even discuss the transgender issues with anybody unless they're prepared to concede a couple of things straight out of the gate. They've got to concede the fact that there is a difference between that sex is we're a dimorphic species and you can't literally change sex.
I want to have discussions on that. Yeah, absolutely. But
if they don't concede that point, then I know there is no point having a conversation with them at all, because we won't even be able to get to a coherent understanding of what transgenderism, the prefix trans man or trans woman means nothing unless you can accept that concept out of the gate. So you're not actually having a conversation about anything that you can put a meaningful definition to.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that's important. But the problem is that most of them aren't like, okay. So as old Joe asked the question before, they're so tied to that identity that they're not going to capitulate anything. They're not going to give any ground. I watch Billboard Chris videos, and even though I think there's some issues with his ideology as well, he's pretty much on target, and he always talks to the people that never can make a coherent argument. And that's my problem. I look for people that make coherent arguments, and yet I cannot find them. And it's disturbing. It's distressful. It is like, what am I doing wrong when I'm asking for people to have coherent? And I have a filter. I have a line that you have there, John, that if somebody doesn't meet a bare minimum, then why am I going to bother having a discussion with them? And I'm not asking for much. They don't have to have any kind of formal education. They don't have they don't have to graduate high school. I don't give a shit. But they have to at least be able to capitulate some fundamental facts.
Yeah,
there are a lot of people as well who haven't even.
You'll be on a panel with a pigeon chess player and say, the others say, just fling an insult at you, then declare victory, and it's a waste of time.
That's all I do. It's a waste of my time, Hank.
For example, the chat we had with Planetwalk the other day.
But she was really good.
She was She was absolutely great. We had a perfectly civil, great conversation.
So
we had some fundamental disagreements, but we were civil. And at the end of the conversation, we all went away. Those are the conversations I want to have.
She even told me today. She's like, she said, she had an issue with one of my tweets, but she said, look, I don't think this comes from a bad place. Steve is not a bad guy, but I disagree with him. Okay, great, love it. I say that to people all the time. Look, you're Hank, I've disagreed with before. Ozian, I've disagreed before. Even you, John, I probably disagree with something. But it doesn't matter. People, that's what we want. We want disagreements. That has no impact on the actual person. I don't think Ozian or Hank have ever came from a bad place. I've never seen Ozian nor Hank or you, John, ever, in my opinion, come from a bad place for an argument. You never, ever that I've seen ran fallacious arguments just for the sake of running a fallacious argument. I'm sure people can employ sophistry and let people know I'm being sophistic. I understand that. Nothing wrong with that. But it always comes from a good place. And that's the difference. But I do want to address the live chat real quick if I can. Soul Watcher says, okay, so they're both a negative claim. Should there be a specific term for it? Not really. Why? A claim's a claim.
Yes,
I actually claims. So what?
Yeah, I have a term for it. So pretty much a lot of atheists or specifically focused on, especially the atheist activists, focused on one specific God, and that is the Abrahamic God, Yahweh. So I want to call those people Abrahamic mesotheists, for to be specific.
Well, if they're a theist, right? A mesotheist has to be a theist. It's incoherent to say an atheist is a mesotheist. That's incoherent to me. Would you agree, Hank?
Actually, I would agree, but the way they don't act like atheists, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because atheists wouldn't talk on a talk show about one specific God for a couple hours.
I mean, everybody can have a slight disconnect between their stated preference and their revealed preference in the way they act, don't they?
I don't have a problem with that. Yeah. Chris Goodwin says, atheist is what we call a lack of belief. No, that's not what we call that. We call lack of belief non-theism. If you go look at Wikipedia under non-theism, it tells you that atheism is a subset, a proper subset. Well, it doesn't use the word proper, but it is a proper subset of non-theism. So you have a logical dichotomy between theism and not theism, right? Because not theism is a complementary set of theism. Atheism is a subset of non-theism. So if you lack a belief, it could be agnostic, it could be atheist, it could be a theological and cognitivist, it could be an ichtheist, it could be a whole bunch of different things. So just because you have a lack of belief, it does not necessitate that you're an atheist.
Is it worth for the live chat, Steve? Just starting from the foundational set and then just giving examples of what sits in each set as we go up the set, the hierarchy of sets, or is that?
Not really. I mean, I don't know if you want to, but let me just finish this and go ahead. So he goes on to say, belief there's no God is usually what we call strong atheist. I just call that atheist. My paper shows why we should not be making atheists into strong and weak. It makes no sense to do that. It is, in fact, degrading the axiological value of the word atheist by saying strong and weak atheist. There's no value added by saying strong. It's just atheist, period. It's atheist. But non-theism and anti-theist also work, but those are not typically used, those words, right? Atheism is not the same thing as non-theist. They're different size sets. And an anti-theist is a person who holds, again, as explained earlier, somebody who axiologically holds that theism or the belief in God or religion does not overall add to the net value of society. That's an anti-theist. If I say I'm an anti-theist in something I write, then a philosophy person is going to say, yeah, that person believes that the actual belief that God does not exist or religion is harmful to society, net value. If I say I'm an anti-theist in a paper, they're not going to take that as, oh, Steve believes there's no God, because that's not what the word means. Chris, do you understand that, Chris Goodwin, in the live chat there?
The contrary position would be like pro-theist or...
Yes, protheism.
Like,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Protheism and anti-theism are contradictories. They're antithetical to themselves. So a protheist is somebody who says that religion or the belief in God is more beneficial to society. That's a protheist.
See, I'm not necessarily a pro-theist, but I do think that some the sort of religious belief does have some utility to it. I take the evolutionary biologist perspective that it wouldn't be so prevalent within our culture and our societies, across the globe if it didn't have it. It doesn't necessarily have to have utility now. It could be an artifact of something in the past, but if it didn't have some kind of utility in the past, it's a massive and colossal waste of resources that would have been selected out for if it didn't do anything useful.
No, I'm agnostic on it. I'm not a pro-theist or anti-theist. I think that religion has benefits, also has detriments. And
I sort of think of it from the perspective of Chesterton's fence. I'm similar. I'm thinking, we can't just rip it out of the ground and burn it all down and think that it's not going to have an effect. I think if we did that, there would be some significant, societal and cultural erosion.
Oh, I agree.
I'm not sure exactly what it does, but it does something.
I do want to counter. You could go back and look at like slavery's been a consistent thing throughout human history. Just because something has been common for humans, and there might be some biological factors. I think when we look at apophenia, which we see patterns within nature and we make connections between these patterns, it seems like we evolved this thing as a survival mechanism. I think that would explain why we made these connections between the thunder and gods, is because there must be some type of causal relation for why thunder is happening. So something's causing it. And then people see intentionality. We might be prone to seeing actual intentionality behind other movements, because if we do that, there's survival. Because if there's a movement in the bush, it's probably an animal, a survival mechanism involved with that. That doesn't mean it's good, though. That doesn't mean it's good.
Well, I mean, good's doing a lot of heavy lifting there, if you're going to use the word good. But I agree with you. So again, this is sort of from an evolutionary biologist perspective. Not that I am. I just follow quite a lot of them. The notion that you can believe something that is literally false, but if you metaphorically believe it to be true, it can provide utility to you. And obviously, as you say, with the movement in the bush, hominid A and hominid B are stood next to a bush and it rustles. Hominid A assumes it's a predator and buggers off. Hominid B assumes it's the wind. And hominid B is going to be actually right most often. But when it turns out that it is a predator, hominid B is going to get eaten. And if that happens before they breed, then we have just preferentially selected for finding agency in things that don't have agency.
But then there's a subset of our culture that said, I'm not going to presume there's agency with the bush. I'm going to investigate. So it looks like humans, because of this dysphoria of humans all across the world, that we decided to go look to see what was in the bush while being cautious about maybe there is agency in the bush. So it seems like there's this duopoly between avoiding the bush and investigating this bush. Some people will avoid the bush or survival mechanisms. Some people will investigate what's in that bush.
I think this is where the analogy breaks down between this example and religion, because if the hominid C goes and investigates the bush, then like hominid B, C also gets eaten, because eventually there is going to be a predator in there.
I would argue it this way, that there are arguments to be had that useful fictions have utility, or can have utility, because we have useful fictions all the time.
I was listening to Modern Wisdom the other day. He was talking to Alex O'Connor, and he said they were talking about this exact thing, except they were talking about it from the perspective of the gun is always loaded. And he goes, yeah, it's from a safety perspective, it's always benefit. You could absolutely 100% know that the gun is not loaded, but you always treat it as if it is loaded.
Right.
But if somebody breaks into your house, you're not going to go downstairs and confront that person, believing the gun's loaded when you know it's not.
Correct. I agree with that. I think there's utility to useful fiction,
and that sort of speaks to what you were saying, Ocean. I think.
Well, we do investigate the bush. I mean, we don't just run away from the noise in the bush. Humans are inquisitive. We adapted to our environment where we learned how to safely investigate what was causing that noise in the bush. I think that's a difference between the evolution of humanity in general and maybe other type of hominids, is we adapted to safely investigate what was causing the rustling in the bush. So just like, it's sort of like maybe why we've given up a lot of the animism, these ancient religious sort of concepts that we used to believe was true, because we were learning slowly, and we pass on this knowledge as a species, and I think we are adapted to also investigate the bush. So to say one is better than the other, I don't know is the case. So I'm not necessarily pro-theist. What I would say is that for society to function, and I think we are a social species, and society needs to function together. And I've been changing my mind a little bit about the ark story in the Bible. I think there is a moral lesson to be learned about that story. Is like, we do live on an ark ship, and when societies don't function, tragic things can happen. And maybe that was the story that was being lost through like thousands of years.
So that's how I read it. I read it that if you allow corruption and dishonesty and all of these bad things to thrive within your society will destroy itself, basically. That's the way I read it, just because if for it to literally be the case, we find no geological evidence of it, and it is on its face batshit crazy, because the story itself is full of contradiction.
But we don't. You're giving a steel man. I mean, a best case scenario, right? You're still reading into what you think the author meant by the parable.
Well, even with that being the case, we don't need the mythos to understand the moral lesson about culture and society. So I do think we do need some type of, as a social species, we need some type of social cohesion that brings us together, but it doesn't necessarily it has to be a belief in a God.
Do you think in a time of greater ignorance about...
What?
Do you think in the in sort of like times of, going back into the ancient world, where we were just, I'm not using the word ignorant as a pejorative, but we just were more ignorant of the natural world, of how things worked, disease, etc., etc., etc. Do you think religion had a way of sort of bootstrapping useful behaviors into the population without having to justify it? Like, God says so then they go and do it. And an example I would give is like halal meat. The areas of the world where sort of how an animal should be butchered, where essentially the animal is hung alive and the throat's cut and then the heart pumps all the blood out. Well, that actually prolongs meat. It prolongs the time before the meat goes bad, because it's the hemoglobin in the blood that expedites that process. And I'm not suggesting that do you think that religious tradition was sort of self-reinforcing, and just wait, God says do this, because then it saved maybe somebody who had observed this physical this thing happen in the real world, where, well, actually, if I kill the animal like this, do you see what I mean? It's
If you're a fan of natural philosophy, then you kind of like religion, because religious institutions bootstrapped natural philosophy.
Yeah, I think natural philosophy can stem from religion, but I would argue that it's not religion per se, it's ontology, the worldview. So if you go I spent a while, like a week or two. I read this book by this Christian philosopher about ancient Near Eastern cosmologies and cultures, about what they believed was true. And if you look at ancient worldviews, and the whole concept was like, you live in New York City, you know what's going on in New York City. What's going on in California is less clear. Like, so your worldview is sort of like in New York City. So we take that back, 2,500 years ago, where people were isolated. They didn't understand what was going on next door. There might be shared commerce and trade and communication between these different groups. So you'll see shared, like, memes, I can't remember the actual word, doesn't matter. You see shared concepts because of the shared sort of interactions within the culture in those areas. But you look at like cultures in North America that we have records there's a lot of similarities with the cultures in the Middle East or in India, because nature is nature, right? So humans are humans. So when we discover the world, we build this ontology, a worldview that we accept as true. And some of those connections we make are, well, these gods make it true and make it the case, and we teach this as if it's true. It doesn't necessarily mean we need the gods to teach things, as we're learning now, starting probably, a couple hundred years ago, we started learning we don't need to use gods to explain everything. Well, more than that, like 500-600 years ago, more like, right? We didn't need to use gods to explain everything about the world. That goes back more like 2,000 years ago. I'm rambling now. But the idea...
I think your point is, and if I could kind of like pin it up, is that most of the time we as inquisitive species, a species that's very inquisitive, we want to have explanation for something. And back then, they didn't have the tools that we have now to explain things. And so they created these entities to explain phenomenon that they weren't able to explain by modern explanations. They didn't have scientific theories. So if we took a scientific theory back 2,000 years ago and explained to them, hey, look, thunder, lightning, electrostatics, we can explain in meteorology. They would probably go, oh crap, yeah, that particular God doesn't exist. We have an explanation from now, and I think a lot of them probably would renounce religion entirely. I think a lot of them would even be theist if they really understood what we understood now. Many of them would probably be atheist. I believe that.
And 2,500 years ago, there were cultures on this earth that you could explain these theories to. They understood the fundamental concepts well enough that you could teach them what we know today. We know that at least 2,500 years ago. Humans haven't evolved. I mean, how much have we really evolved?
Yeah.
Well, based on the cranial capacity of sort of our species going back, I can't remember where I heard it, but I think you could go back sort of somewhere in the region of 100 to 150,000 years, and if you could pick up, like, if you could teleport a small child from 150,000 years ago and stick them in our educational institutions today, there would be no meaningful difference between the intellect of that child and a child that was born in our culture. It's the thing that has given us our advantage isn't a change in biology, it's our understanding of science and tool use and collaboration with other people. It's the modern.
Yeah. I do want to pin this really quick, Steve. So I think what you're talking about, so when we talk about religion bootstrapped these ideas, these concepts to create a cohesive society, we don't need the religious part of that to bootstrap these same concepts anymore, because we've learned a better method of understanding the natural world. So I don't think we need the religious mandate. And religious, I mean, we're really bad at mandating people's beliefs, I think. But so I don't think we need religion to be able to understand morality.
No,
we don't need religion to understand science or anything like that. I think the benefit to human survival is understanding the natural world around us. But evolution only cares about us popping out some sperm into, and having some kids. That's all evolution cares about.
Differential reproduction. That's mainly it, right? That's all natural selection is differential reproduction. Birth weight, death weight, which is, by the way, another hangout that I want to have on statistics when it comes to, because somebody was talking to me about trans people having their names on birth certificates and death certificates changed, and that changes statistics. And we don't go by people's changed names for death certificates. We go by what their birth certificate name is. And I actually had a trans person. Hang on, I actually had a trans person argue, no, it should go by the name that they changed to. No, that's not how statistics work. It's stupid. We don't want to have people looking back to this generation and go, hey, what was statistics of the death rates between male and female when they're actually including males there? It makes no sense. It's statistically stupid. I do want to address Awesome Lossom's argument, even though he was in jest, but it's actually a prevalent point that he makes. But he says, Steve is like, look, look, and this is not me quoting that, but look, we understand a lot of things and we can explain them, therefore God doesn't exist. And here's the thing, though. That's actually not a bad argument if you're talking about justifications, right? If we're looking at historically people that did not understand science, and then we give them the tools to better understand science, and they realize they don't need a God to explain things, I think as an argument they had is they might become atheists. They might look at the atheist argument and say these are atheist arguments against God existing, which are the other arguments, not particularly that one. That's not an argument against God, but it might undermine their justifications for why they believe in God to have them look and find atheist arguments like logical problem evil, evidential problem evil, divine hiddenness, etc., and then go, oh yeah, they are now atheists. So I think that when I say that they will look at the phenomenon and now have a better understanding of it based upon science, that would undermine their justifications for why they are atheists in the first place, or could, and then they can go learn about atheism and actually, change their position on it. So I think there's something to be had there. I think there's a good argument to be had that historically many people, if they knew the science, probably would become atheists, or at least many of them would, or at the very least some of them.
Most of the world is theist now, and they have access to all this knowledge today.
But think about it, Ozian. That's different. 2,000 years ago, this would have been unbelievable to them. This would have been revolutionary to them. People take for granted the knowledge they have now. They really do. Matter of fact, we have more access to information now than ever, and yet I see some of the most dumbest people in the world because they don't know how to interpret the evidence.
It always makes me really angry when you see sort of like you've got parents who have unfortunately obese children, and then people say, oh yeah, but the schools never taught us how to cook a healthy meal. You've got a phone in your fucking pocket that gives you access to all of the new positive nutritional recipes, supermarkets where food has never been fucking cheaper. You're telling me
not here. Here's never been more expensive. In California, prices are higher than they've ever been ever.
What I mean is, like, in order to make a home cooked healthy meal, the raw ingredients that you need, a packet of minced beef, a tin of chopped tomatoes, a tube of garlic, and some fucking rice.
I'm hungry.
You can make a decent healthy meal for next to no
Amazon
family.
Oh yeah.
And the argument is that we're not taught how to do this at school. I'm speaking to this sort of this bifurcation in our society that we seem to have, where there are people like us who have access to all of this information and we can never seem to get enough. We're curious and just want to shovel it into our brains. And then there's people who will claim that because school didn't teach X or didn't teach Y, that now gives them an excuse to be ignorant and cause harm.
Well, we both agree that critical thinking should be fundamental in elementary school.
Yes. Teach people how to learn.
Right.
Oh my God.
I have people cite me stuff, and I'm like, you're not even reading this properly. You're not even reading what you think it means. It's not. And again, I check it with other people that know what the hell they're talking about, and they're like, yeah, they're not reading it correctly. Chris says,
junior and secondary education without anybody ever sitting down and explaining to me what a logical syllogism was.
No, not once.
I had to go and find it myself, and I'm like, how can we teach people to rationalize out the bullshit that gets shilled at them if they can't, in principle, take his argument, distill it into propositions, and see if the conclusion follows?
But they're teaching them gender theory, right? I mean, it's ridiculous.
Well, they should learn They should learn like statistics and polling, so they can't be influenced by media when some stinking poll. They know how to read the data. They know how to
look at
formulate their own ideas. But how when I grew up, if you went to the library, there was something wrong with you. Now it's if you Google something, there's something wrong with you. You're supposed to learn it in school or not at all.
Well, how many times have we seen people have arguments where somebody's arguing from there might be an artifact of behavior that affects one population, one subgroup within a population over another, and then you've got one person who's arguing there are more people pro rata for the number of these people in the population, and the other person goes, yes, but this group does it more, and you're, yes, but there's more of them.
And I'll give you an example of that very thing, almost, Ozian, and kind of what you're talking about, John. Real quick, though. Chris says, so an atheist has faith in no God? No. An atheist that is rational will say there's no God based upon justifications, based upon logical inferences, entailments, implications, argumentation. I don't know any atheist. I don't know any atheist takes on faith there's no God. I don't know of one.
It could be based on faith, but yeah, it's not a rational.
It could be, but I don't know any of them.
Then.
But it would be a rational. Matter of fact, here's the thing: theists who take God's existence only on faith is inherently not rational.
But they don't do that. Most of them
no, they do. No, there are ones that do. They're called fietists. A fietist takes on faith that God exists and is unjustified, which means it's not rational, but it doesn't mean it's irrational. It's irrational.
That's what they claim, but there's no way
I
became a theist.
I know, but
yeah, bullshit.
I think theism is a difficult position for me to justify.
People will say that testimony, like their parents teach them is true, is not evidence towards it being true. They'll say it's irrational to accept theism as true because
it is, dude. You got to.
It's irrational, but it's not based solely on faith,
right? But it's still.
But it's not based solely on faith.
Right.
Yeah, it's based on evidence.
It's weak evidence. It's very, very weak evidence, and certainly not scientific evidence.
Right.
But
cultural beliefs are not based out of thin air.
No, they come
cultural
from
beliefs
other places.
based on the culture. Yeah.
So
their Christianity is not based on a thin air. Anyway, sorry.
You're talking about like statistics and things of that nature, and I don't do this intentionally. I really don't. Maybe once or twice, but it's really rare. I really don't really try. But I do polling a lot, right, on my Twitter. So I ask a lot of questions. I do polls, and of course, these are not any kind of scientific polls. Okay, they're just to give me a feel of what people think, a little bit obviously for engagement, but really it's not even for engagement. I don't give a shit. It's just I want to know what people think more than anything else. But I've noticed that if I put my position down, like my view, that some people might be skewed to that, right? They might answer the way that agree with me because I've already put down what the correct answer is, right? And so sometimes I'll put the correct answer or what my belief, and other times I don't. But if I put my answer in there, I guarantee it, and I can't prove this, but I guarantee it just intellectually that there's going to be skewing of that poll data because I've given them the answer. And some of them are going to go, oh, I have no idea. I'm just going to go what Steve says. That will happen. It's inevitable. So when I do a poll, sometimes I'll give my position and sometimes I won't, because if I give my position, it's going to skew it a little bit. I just don't care at that point. But if I don't get my position, then I really kind of looking for more of an actual representative sample of the people that follow me. And that's not really intentional. It just kind of seems to be that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Steve, when you do that, do you find that people are more influenced by you putting your answer down first when there's actually a fact of the matter to be had, or when we're talking about this? But do you find that that's more or less common when you're sort of asking your opinion on what people's position is on something, like, say, transgender women's bathrooms? There's not an objective fact of the matter to be had there. You're just asking people's personal preference.
Correct. Yeah, especially on subjectivity stuff. Yes. Especially on subjective stuff, right? Now, I could say something that is objectively true that somebody may not understand, and put down, hey, look, equals 1. Same thing, yeah, exactly. I put that down and say, look, this is true. God. Is this true or false? People or that don't know math are going to say it's true merely because Steve says so, right? They're going to be skewed by that, even though it's objectively true.
I'm doing that. Somebody wants to do that debate on my channel next weekend.
Stop it.
I'm not kidding.
Who?
I said, can we at least Time Lord? I said, can we at least?
Wait. So talk to me about this.
Red said he'll debate him. Red's rhetoric said he'll debate him. I said, can we at least?
No. Reds, stay in your lane, Reds. Stay in your lane. Do you hear me, Reds? Stay in your lane. Do flatter stuff. If it's 0.99 repeating equals 1, I want in on that. I'll tag team. I'll go in with Reds. You're serious?
I'd rather
it's not true.
He argued that 0.999 does not equal 1.
Wait, first of all, how is Reds going to argue that? Reds knows, math, but I don't think he really knows like Calc level 2 stuff, does he?
Oh, I don't know, but I try to ask him, like what he means by the question. Like, are you accepting like the axiomatic claims of math are true? Like, what are you trying to claim? Like, is it language? Is it invented? Is it discovered?
When you're trying to have this weekend, I could do it.
He's going to message me. So
yeah, I won't do it with Reds. I want to be on that panel.
Okay, he wants to debate it, but what's a debate, dude? I don't even get it. Like,
screw debate. No, just discussion, because debate's useless. The debate would be over and done. Here's a mathematical proof paper that's submitted in a
I'll message you.
Yeah, I mean, and again, you don't have to have very high math for this. But I want to know his argument, because this is my shtick, right? 0.9 repeating equals 1 is,
He knows about you too. He said, I just read Steve's paper on it.
I don't have a paper on that.
I thought you did something post.
Oh, I did. I have I have a blog entry.
Definition, identity.
No, I have yes, Virginia 0.99 repeating equals 1, and then I came up with 4 questions that people should be asked if they deny it. Did you ever see those?
I saw you post something. I never bothered. I just accept it as true. Like 0.666 continuing is equal to 2/3. Like that's just true.
Here, I'll put the link in the live chat so people can go read it. So I wrote a blog on this called yes, Virginia 0.99 repeating really does equal 1. So in the live chat, go check out my 4 things that I wrote. That I said, if you ever find anyone who thinks otherwise, challenge them to answer these 4 questions. And I have never to this date, and I wrote this back in 2018. I have never once had anybody answer these 4 questions. Not one of them. Certainly not all of them. Not even one of them. Not one of these have been answered. So if he can answer one of them, I'll be impressed.
Basically, he said he was going to make up his own math. It sounded like. I'm like, why are we? He wants a fun debate. I'm like, okay.
Well, yeah.
I guess you're tired of hearing flat Earth stuff and religious stuff. So
yeah. Sorry. Yeah, get me in on that.
Okay. I'll let you know. He wants to prepare for it. I'm like, what's there to prepare? I'd rather debate like is anti-realism versus realism for math. Like that sounds like a better debate.
What do you want to debate?
Like math. Are you a realist or anti-realist when it comes to math?
Oh, I would say that I probably tend to Platonic realism nowadays, even though I understand why people tend to nominalism, because I was a nominalist for a very long time. But I do think that Quine makes some good arguments about why we should treat mathematics and abstract concepts as concrete. Although the problem with that particular topic, it gets very, 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 very technical and very boring when it comes to nominalism versus Platonic realism.
Yeah. Well, I'd rather hear the debate than if 0.9999 equals 1. It's so dumb. Especially if you're just going to deny math. I'm like, if you're going to deny math, like, okay. Like, what's the point of the debate then?
Well, I mean, you got that guy Terrence Howard that arguing that 1 + 1 = 1 or something like that. It's like stupid.
He's
1 times 1 = 2. He argues because he makes up his own math. Okay, well, anybody can make up their own math. That's constructivism. Doesn't mean it has any utility. I mean, in fact, it's so funny too. Again, when we're talking about standard stuff, Ozian, there's something in ring theory called the ring identity, which is basically 1 = 0, right? And when you look at 1 = 0 in standard real analytics, it makes no sense, right? But in real analysis, that actually means something when 1 = 0. What it means is the added identity is equal to the multiplicative identity. And so that has utility in ring theory to say that 1 = 0. But in real analytics, it's nonsensical, right? So when we're talking about different domains of discourse, you have to realize where you're having the conversation. And I think that's really applicable to these types of conversations when people start bringing up other things. Because if I say 1 = 0 and somebody says, well, that's wrong, they're right. But if I say 1 = 0 in ring theory, then I'm correct. And then they can say, well, ring theory is wrong. Well, then they're an idiot because they don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
I would just say I have no idea what you're talking about. Ring theory.
Well,
is that evolution stuff?
No. Ring theory is mathematics, deal with fields, groups.
Oh,
and
I never took me on calculus one either.
I have a page on that too on my blog, but I didn't write it. Dr. Pi wrote it, and I think it was, and I just took it from him blatantly and put it on my blog and gave him credit, obviously.
I do understand tidal forces better than a lot of physicists now.
So Dr. Pi wrote. One sec. Dr. Pi wrote on the hierarchy of algebraic structures. Yeah, it was Dr. Pi. And there, I just put it out there if you guys want to read it. But it goes over basic ring theories, giving what's called monads and group homomorphisms. But basically, the additive identity and multiplicative identity is real simple to understand. An additive identity is anything you add to a number that doesn't change it, basically. So 5 plus 0 equals 5. So 0 is the additive identity. Multiplication, the same thing. What number do I times something by and it doesn't change? 5 times what equals 5? 1. 1 is the multiplicative identity. That's what it means. So when we're talking about identities in ring theories, when I say 1 equals 0, is called a zeroth ring, where there's a relationship between the multiplicative identity and the additive identity.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
And then you get into like fields, groups, and what makes a field, what makes a group, what makes a ring.
Mm-hmm.
You have obviously like starting off with the sets of natural numbers, integers, complex numbers. Those are all relationships. Like the real numbers is a field.
Mm-hmm.
And then some other things are not a field. Like the integers are not a field, if I remember correctly. Mathematicians out there, integers aren't a field, right? I know R is a field, but Z is not a field, is it? I'm gonna ask Pi here. A field. I don't think integers are a field. Yeah. Set of Z as integers is not a field. So Q, R, and C are fields, but integers are not. Again, goes into algebra, ring theory stuff.
Okay.
Tangent stuff. Anyways, I got to wrap this up because I didn't want to go more than 2 hours, guys. So.
I just got done streaming. I saw you here, and cool. I should have been in bed, but
yeah, I want to eat and go to sleep.
I had the deer on the came on stage to tell me I have a mental defect. That's why I don't.
You get a lot of crap, don't you, dude?
Oh, really he has the worst argument for Islam.
Yeah, I don't.
Oh yeah, they flat earthers hate me.
I don't deal with Islam stuff. But yeah, so get to Time Lord and get with Reds, and yeah, I want to in on that. Just message me. Would you do that?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Ozian. Thanks, John. Thanks for watching, guys. It's gonna be a little bit longer than expected, but that's great because I love when it does. But my voice is starting to get going, and I'm starting to get GERDs. I did find out I have a number of hernias. I guess I have a hiatal hernia, and that's causing acid reflux. Acid reflux. So that kind of explains that, but it still sucks because it's acting up right now. Anything else you want to add, Ozzy and John, before we leave?
No. If people are interested in hearing me talk, they come check out Matters Now. So we do a lot of shows on there.
All right. Then with that, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. See you guys later. Make sure you leave a comment, like, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter because this is where a lot of this stuff comes from, and I'm happy to engage on Twitter. And I have these spaces at least once a week anymore, maybe even 2. But it's always going to be on the weekends for the most part. For the most part, not always. But Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays are my best evenings. So, all right, with that, good night, guys. And I will let you know if JCO Journey gets a hold of me and if I can go on his channel to maybe suss out his argument a little bit more and talk to him about his paper. The link to his video is in the video description. If you want to go watch it for yourself before I do either a more formal review on it or I just be able to hang out with him and talk to him directly on it. Okay? So, yeah, GERD, so watcher, GERDs is not fun. It's just one of many things when you get old. But at least I know what my GERDs are caused from now. I had an endoscope years ago, and I had pre-ulcers and other things, but this explains the GERDs. But the doctor was a nurse practitioner at the time. The doctor wasn't there, but the nurse practitioner basically said, "There's not much you can do about it. It's not really worth it. It would cause more. It causes more problems to fix than it's worth. But just maintain it with diet." And then they put me on Pepsid. Yeah, Pepsid AC type stuff, prescription level stuff. All right, so thanks, Ozian. We'll catch you later, guys, and see you tomorrow. Peace.